Hello and welcome to this training webinar on SAP Business One production. My name is Kevin Solanki, and for the next hour or so we'll be going through the SAP functionalities around the production module. Let's have a quick look at the agenda we've got for today. So we're going to run through a bit of an introduction of the production module, then have a look at some of the setup related to it. Have a look at the resource capabilities in SAP. Then we'll have a look at bills of materials, the BOM Component Management, where you can mass delete, remove, replace BOM components. Have a look at the production cost roll-up functionality. Then we'll have a look at production orders and the related issues and receipts. Brief look at some of the standard reports, and finally we'll have a question and answer segment. So let's begin by just having a brief understanding of production and what's possible in the standard SAP. So production in SAP will allow you to create bills of materials where you can specify quantities of components that make up a product. You can also define resources, machinery or labor that go into making it. And so the resources area then also allows you to define some capacity and monitor the capacity as well as look at the costing of those resources. And finally, you can raise production orders, which basically are a set of instructions for planning and assembling a product. And the production order tracks all the material-related transactions and the costs involved in making it. And that's really the core functions or the features inside SAP in relation to production. So we'll have a look at some of the setup in SAP relating to this. So firstly, under administration, system initialization, general settings, you've got a resources tab. Now, resources have been introduced in SAP Business One since version 9.1, so this concept didn't exist prior to that. And so the setup here is similar to what you'd set up for items. What is the default warehouse when you use a resource in a bill of material or in a production order? Do you wish to automatically add all warehouses when you create a new resource? And when you are defining capacity or looking at the capacity of a resource, what's the default period you wish to look at? So that's one of the settings you need to look at. Then secondly, you also need to define your resource groups. So it's basically a hierarchical structure. You have resource groups, and within each resource group you can have a number of resources. So first, let's have a look at the resources group setup. So if I look at this particular one that I've got, so firstly, the resource groups is available through administration, setup, resources, and resource groups. So give it a name, and then the resource types can be either a machine, a labor, or other. And you can define the default unit of measure for resources in this group. And then you can define the various cost elements, up to 10, that are part of this resource costing. And you can name each one of those resource cost elements, and also give it a default cost. So once you've done that, the next setup you need to do is resource properties. So you can also go in and define, just like you can for items and customers, you can also define properties for resources, and you can give them your name, whatever name you wish to give them, and then you can use those for selection in reports. And next setup is the financial side of things. So when you have a resource and you are consuming it, what GL accounts should be posted to for each one of those cost elements. So under Setup, Financials, GL account determination, and then GL account determination again. If you go to the Resources tab, you can see now the 10 cost elements that we saw earlier, plus you can also define the work in progress account. So basically these are the accounts that will get credited whenever you issue a resource for production, and it's basically your recovery account. So you can have a different account for each cost element, but also with the advanced GL determination functionality in SAP, you can also have a different recovery account by the resource group. So you might have for your machines, you might have one recovery account, but for your skilled labor, you might have different recovery accounts for different cost elements. Okay, so that's looking at the setup. Now let's have a look at a resource master. So as we saw earlier, so there is a new menu system called resources, and within that we're going into the resource master data. And I'll pick up a machine resource initially. So I'm looking at this resource here called machine number 1. And so machine number 1 obviously is resource type machine. It belongs to resource group number 1. And my unit of measure for this resource is an operational cycle. Okay, so this is this 3 settings here, the unit of measure, the time per resource unit, and the resources per time period is what's used to work out the capacity or the runtime requirements for a particular resource. So in this case, what I've got is a unit of measure of an operational cycle, and an operational cycle runs for 1 hour, and within that 1 hour, I can do 5 resource units. So effectively, I could show this in a different way. I could say my time per resource unit is 12 minutes, and my resource units per time period is 1. That would give me the same effect. So this is basically 60 minutes divided by 5, which gives us the 12. So that's setting up your capacity. Then let's have a look at some of these other settings. So the issue method can be manual or backflush. So if it's set to manual, then when you're working with a production order, you'd have to go in and issue the actual time period that was spent working on this production. If it was backflush, then whatever is the planned quantity will get issued automatically when you receive the final product. Resource allocation, and we've got 4 choices here. So you could have the resource allocated on the start date of the production order. You could have all of the resource requirements allocated on the end date of the production order. Or you could say, well, we want it from the start date and forwards, and what would happen in that case is it would start consuming the resources that are available moving forward until it gets to the due date, and on the due date it will then put the rest of the resourcing requirements. Or if you went end date and backwards, then it would start from the end date and consume the resources until it got to the start date, and if there was any balance, all of that would go against the start date. Now keep in mind that the resource allocation doesn't understand, currently at least in the current versions, do not understand what other production orders have already been allocated to this resource. So it's just purely looking at what the planned capacity available is. It doesn't understand what else is already allocated there, and so you might still have a situation where you've over allocated jobs to the resource. The actual resource allocation process runs on the production order when you create a new production order, when you update the planned quantity on the production order, or you change the resource allocation method on that production order, or you change the warehouse line on the production order. Also, when you update the due date of the production order. Now, if you update the capacity of a resource, that will not affect the resource allocation that's already happened previously. So we'll have a look at how the capacity is set up. But before we do that, let's just have a look at the costing one more time. So this costing has come through from the resource group that I've defined, but I can change the capacity or the cost if I choose to on this particular machine. And you can also see there's a total cost of the machine defined based on the sum of the different cost elements that we've got. What you'll also notice is that if I went into a labor resource, the resource cost elements would be different based on the resource group that was selected against that labor resource. So you can see here, in this case, I've got labor cost and HR cost, whereas on the machine, it's at electricity consumption and operating costs. So let's have a look at the capacity setup now. So firstly, we're looking at what capacity is available on this resource by warehouse for that default given period that we had previously defined. So we've got 1,380, in this case, operational cycles available, of which 891 are committed on production orders. 114 have already been consumed, and this is over that given period. And so the available capacity for this resource in warehouse 01 is 375, which is just internal minus committed minus consumed. So that's the planned capacity and the committed and consumed on this resource. If I go to the planning data tab, this is where I can define what the normal capacity is for each day of the week. And so what I've got here is 4 standard daily capacity factors. I can choose to use one or all of them. It's really up to me. And here I can see that on Monday, if you want to think of it like this, that I've got 12, I'm running this machine for 12 hours, and I've got 5 of the same machines. So I've got a total capacity of 60 hours on this machine on Monday. And so the same on Tuesday all the way to Friday. And then on Saturday, I'm only running it for 8 hours, and I'm only running one of the machines, so my capacity is 8. I can also link, because this resource is a resource type machine, I can also link this to a fixed asset in the system, and that's all I can do. This is purely information. I can't do any other type of maintenance planning or anything else. It's just purely information that this resource is linked to this fixed asset. I've got the properties. I can do attachments and remarks. So if I go back to this tab here with fixed assets, now if this was a resource type employee or labor rather than machine, so if I look at one of these labor ones, then I can actually link records from the HR section of SAP against this resource. Again, only for information purposes. So I can see the capacity here. I can specify the planned capacity. What I can also do is look at the internal resource capacity on a daily basis. Now, to do that, I can do that 2 ways. I can either right-click on the resource master and say, show me the internal resource capacity, or I can go through resources menu and look at resource capacity through there. Either way will take me through the same screen. So I'm just going to do the right click, internal resource capacity. And now I can see for that particular resource by warehouse what capacity is available. And note that this is cumulative capacity. So it's summing up day by day. If I untick the cumulative option, then I got the daily capacity. And I can see that it's 48, 48, 48 all the way across. I can choose, if I choose, I can change the capacity for a particular day. I might have a machine down. I might only be running 3 machines. Whatever the case, I can maintain this data here. I can also go in and look at committed capacity on a daily basis. So I've changed from internal, which is sort of the planned capacity or the available capacity, to committed, and now I can see on a day-by-day basis what the load is on this machine. I can click on the box on the number, and I can see what production orders are contributing to that number. I'm just going to quickly go into one of these production orders. So I'll go, it's 181, and we're looking at machine 1, and so we can see here that's the planned capacity that was calculated, and that's come through onto our resources as a commitment. Now we'll have a closer look at some of this when we look at the production order. So you can see here, this is my commitment. I can also see what's been consumed. So this will show me day by day what issues for production have happened against this resource. And I can also then drill in and see what production orders they were. And I can also see available capacity. So I can see I'm in a bit of trouble because I've got too much on and not enough capacity. And if I tick the show cumulative from today, then I can also see that I've got a big hole in terms of available capacity. If I go in and just remove the filter and just choose warehouse 01 and click refresh, now I can see the 4 different resources I've got and the cumulative available capacity for each one of those, and you can see that some of these resources I've got enough capacity coming up and then sort of going into problematic areas again. From here, what I can also do is I can set the capacity for a particular machine or a particular labor resource. And so the way I can do that is if I choose a different warehouse, and let's pick my resource for labor. And I can click on this menu item, set daily internal capacity. And so that brings up that screen with the filters that I had on the previous screen. And then from here I can select which days I wish to set a capacity for. And if I just click the update button now, it will just look at the resource master. Whatever the planned capacity is will get pulled in. And that's what I've just done. And now I can see that it's put in 48, capacity of 48 for every day for that given period. And that's just coming from the planning data on the resource master itself. Okay, so you can also note that we can set the daily internal capacity directly from that menu item as well, rather than going through the resource master. So that's setting up the resources, the capacities, looking at the capacity and working out whether you've got enough capacity or not. Let's now move to the next topic, which is looking at bills of materials. So that's under production and bill of materials. Now SAP allows you to create 4 different types of bills of materials, which are the assembly, sales, production, and template. Obviously, from a manufacturing perspective, the production one is of the most interest to us, but I'll also give a brief explanation of the other 3 types of bills of materials for information. So firstly, let's talk about the sales and assembly bill of material. Because essentially they are the same things with a slight difference in how they operate from a functionality perspective. So the sales and assembly BOM represent a finished product that is only assembled at the sales stage. That is, the finished product is composed of component items only when the parent product is actually sold. The component items are stored and tracked in the warehouse, but you do not manage the parent product as an inventory item, but rather as a sales item. So they're essentially sales kits. The components can also be sales or inventory items. When you create the delivery or the invoice to dispatch the stock on the custom order, the components are backflashed or issued from the inventory. So let's just have a look at a couple of these. Firstly, I'll look at one which is a sales BOM. And if you then look at the next one, which is an assembly BOM. Now, they've pretty much got the same components. The only difference is if you choose a sales BOM, then you've got an extra option here to hide BOM components in the printout. So let me create a sales order for both of these types of bills of materials, and then we have a look at how they differ. So this one's an assembly BOM, and sales kit 1 is a sales BOM. So you can see that as soon as I picked sales BOM, it automatically also pulled into the sales order the components that go into it. And then as we saw earlier, if you tick the box hide BOM components in printout, then when you're printing any documents from the sales module, then those components will not show in the printout. The assembly BOM does not show any components, but in the background, they both do the same thing. Now the third type is a template BOM. A template BOM is just a bundle of items where the parent product is just the first item on the list. It does not act as a BOM once it's added to the sales document, but rather as a list of items brought together at the same time. You can update the quantity of those items, swap the items, delete them on the BOM or the sales order. The components appear below the parent as a list of items in the sales document. So you really would be using template BOMs when you require flexibility in selecting components for a product. So I've got a template BOM here. This one here, sales kit number 3. If I grab that, and if I put that into my sales order, all it does is pulls in the 3 other items, and then I can just delete certain lines from here, add more lines. They just once they're loaded in, there's no relationship between them. So it's just a brief look at the other 3 types of bills of materials, but the one that's of most interest to us is the production type bill of material, which basically represents a finished product that comprises of child components and some labor and resources, and during the production process you can convert the components and input labor into a finished product. Okay, so let's have a look at a production bill of material. So we're going to have a look at this one here, which is the LM4030. You'll notice that you've got this column here called line type, and so you can add on a bill of material now either a text row, an item row, or a resource row. And the text row allows you to put some work instructions, or you may use them to sort of organize your bill of material by the different work centers or production processes that this product goes through. Now, the resource type we've already looked at, so we can add resources as well. But before we go into all these options on the line level, let's have a look at some of these things at the header level. So we've got the product number, a description coming from the item master data itself. The BOM type is production. Now there is this new field here that's been introduced since SAP version 9.2, which is the production standard cost. So this essentially is a rolled up cost of all the components that go into making this item, starting at the lowest level bills of materials. So if you've got multi-level bills, then it will roll cost all the way to the top level. Now this cost here, if I drill into the item master and go to the production data tab, that's that cost that we were looking at on the bill of material. Now this cost can be manually changed, but when you run the BOM costing roll-up, then it gets calculated. So the same information also exists on all the component items. What you also notice is that on the production data tab now, if the item is a production BOM, then you can drill into the production bill of material from there as well. So if I look at one of the components, I'll also notice that in the production data tab, it has a production standard cost. And so in conjunction with the production standard cost of the components, the planned average production size is used to work out the rolled up cost. Now, why is this planned production size important? Well, because now you've also got the ability to define setup time on your machines or resources. So, and depending on, the bigger the run size, then obviously the less it costs you, because the overhead of the setup gets spread over a greater quantity of product. And we'll have a look at how that impacts the costing when we look at the next section on production cost roll-ups. So now just coming down into the grid itself. So you've got the product, you've got the quantity, you've got the warehouse from which the stock's going to get drawn, the additional quantity, which in fact applicable to your machines and resources. In fact, it's also applicable to inventory type or the item type lines as well, where you might have a situation where you've got to consume some setup material before the machine can properly start running. So you can define it against material lines as well. You can also define a different work in progress account on the bill of material, which may be different from what's set up in the GL determination. Issue method, we've spoken about this previously, but so it's either manual or backflush. If it's backflush, then it automatically consumes the the material components when you receive the final product. Or if it's manual, then you have to go in and specify and issue the components. Please do note that if your bill of material component is a batch or serial tracked item, then you can only do a manual issue. Backflush is not an option. We got the production standard costs, and then the total standard cost based on the quantity on the line. And then you've got these other costs, which could be any price list that you nominate. So in this case, we've got the base price. And so what we've got is a sum of the production standard cost as well as a sum of the total cost based on a price list. And if I went in and hit this triangle, then the sum of these costs would come down here. And if I clicked update, then this price list as defined at the header level would get updated. Okay, so that's looking at the bill of material. One final thing. On a bill of material, you may not be aware, but if you put a negative line as a component, then that's effectively setting it up as if you were going to get a co-product or a byproduct as part of this production process. So that's how you deal or handle co-products. You put in as a negative line on the components area. Okay, so let's now, we've looked at the bill of materials. Let's now look at what you can do from a BOM component management perspective. So this is also a new feature since 9.1. You've got bill of materials component management. And what that allows you to do, you've got three options. It allows you to bulk change BOM lines. It allows you to bulk add lines to a BOM, and it allows you to bulk delete lines. So you'd use the change option if you had a component that's been superseded and you wanted to go in and change all your bills of materials to reflect that change. You've got some selection at the top level to select the parent item. You've got the replacement BOM component, and then you've also got a factor that you're changing on. So you can change, you can delete, so you can just say, well, I wish to just remove this particular component from all my bills of materials, or I wish to add an extra bill of material line, a BOM component to certain bills of materials. So that's a useful little feature when you're wanting to do some bulk changes to bills of materials. Just be warned that there is no screen that shows you what changes are going to be made. It just happens, and if you do pick the wrong options, you might be in for a bit of work to correct it. Okay, so now have a look at the production standard cost management. Now you've got two functions in here. Firstly, and the way you'd use this is firstly you do a BOM standard cost update. And what this would do is it would update the production standard cost figure against the item master based on the current valuation cost of the item. So if the item's set to moving average, then it'll pick up the moving average cost and put it into the BOM standard cost. If it's standard costing already, then it will put that standard cost. So if I pull open my bill of material that we've been looking at previously, and let's just look at one of these items. So I've got LM4021MC, which is my memory chip. And if I look at the stock data, I can see the item cost is currently, in warehouse 01 at least, is $31.25. but the production standard cost is currently $38.41. Now, if I run the BOM standard cost update, I would expect this standard cost to reflect the moving average cost in warehouse 01. So let's just see what happens when you run the BOM cost update. So again, you've got filters and selection criteria if you need to sort of just update costs for certain warehouses. Also do remember or take note that the BOM standard cost or production standard cost does not have a financial impact. It's just information against the bill of material for you to see what the potential cost or theoretical cost of the product is. So I run the process and it just runs through and it tells you it's completed. If I then refresh the bill of material, I can see right away that that $38 has now gone to $31.25. And the top level's probably changed as well because the moving average cost of that item in the warehouse is $234.63. Now, so what I've done so far is updated the standard cost on the components or basically everything. But then when I run the BOM standard cost rollup, what it will do is take all the standard costs and work it from the bottom level all the way to the top level bill of material, taking into account the planned average production size to give me a new production standard cost. So I'm going to run the process now, and it's done basically. And if I refresh the bill of material now, I can see my production standard cost is now $228.18. If I change my average production size to 1, I can see immediately down here the total production standard cost is now reflecting a different number, $256.08. But at the top level, on the item master, it's still $228.18. Go back to 10 just to see what happened. See that there? Went back to $228.18. So this allows you to see what the cost would be depending on the batch size you run. Now, if I change this and leave it at 1, I update this. And if I ran the BOM standard cost roll up one more time, and then I refresh the bill of material again, I can see the standard cost is now $256, which is reflecting whatever the line level was reflecting. Okay, so that's a bit about production costing. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's no financial impact to this. However, if you were running a standard cost accounting system or inventory system, what you could potentially do is use this production standard cost that gets calculated, because it's now stored on the item master as well, and go through the inventory, stock management, stock transactions, stock revaluation option, and then go and revalue the standard costs of these items. So it's a handy tool for doing your periodic standard cost reviews. Okay, now let's have a look at a production order. So under production order. Now you can have 3 different types of production orders. You can either have a standard production order, which is where you have a bill of material, and as soon as you pick the BOM, it will pull in all the components and resources and text lines in. You can have a special type production order. This is where you don't have a standard bill of material, but you wish to do some sort of a one-off production. So you pick standard, you go in and pick the finished product, you go in and pick a bunch of components, and you go off and make this product. So that's the idea behind a special production order, just allowing you to do production ad hoc basis without creating bills of materials. And then the final type is a disassembly bill of material, and this is where you're basically disassembling a finished product back into its components. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go and look at a standard one first. So I'll pick the same item we've been using, LM4030, and we're making, let's say, 10 of these against warehouse 01. I've got a order date. Now I can also define a start date for my production and a due date. So I could say I'm going to start production on the on Friday, and I wish to have it completed by the 23rd. All right, and basically the same start and end dates are also seen on the line levels, and you can also manipulate and change a particular line if you wish to. So we've got a planned quantity. Now what you'll notice is for any items where there was an additional quantity or a setup time, what happens is the planned quantity becomes the base quantity or the bill of material quantity multiplied by the planned quantity plus the additional quantity. So if the additional quantity went to 2, then the planned quantity went to 12. Or if I planned to make 100, then the planned quantity on this machine will go to 101. The warehouses, the issue methods all come through from the bill of material. I can change those if I wish to for a particular production order. And what you'll notice here is the resource allocation, which we looked at on the resource master. Whatever is defined on the resource master automatically gets pulled in to the production order. And you can also see the planned, the theoretical runtime for making this product for each one of those resources. And so if we look at this item here, we can see we're making 10. The machine we saw earlier, we can do 5 per hour. So basically, making 10 gives us 2 hours of machine time, and then plus another 12 minutes of setup. And so that's the total time then being 2 hours and 12 minutes. And it's going to be allocated to the start date and forwards. So if I went and said I'm planning to make 100, then you can see very quickly then it's now saying, well, we've got 20 hours of planned time. So I'm happy with that. I will add the production order. Now the production order, when added, starts off as planned. When you then release it or send it down to the factory floor, you can change the status to released. You can, of course, print the production order, to give the factory work instructions to complete the job, and that layout can be either PLD or crystal reports. So now we've done planning. If we now go and look at our particular machine and look at the resource capacity, and in particular look at the committed one, I would expect, at least for machine 1, because it's set to do the start date forwards, on the 16th there should be an allocation against machine 1 for production order 194. So 16th, and there's our production order for 194. And we might see some capacity allocated, or the remaining capacity allocated on the 19th, because obviously we don't have enough capacity just on the 16th. And as you would recall, the setting was start date and forward. Okay, so now we've created the production order. So the next step in the process is to for people to work on it, and then you'd be consuming some components. So any items that are marked as manual issue, you need to issue the components. And there's two ways of doing this. You can either do it from production, issue for production menu, where you go in and select the production order you wish to issue, or you could select multiple production orders and then multiple lines within those production orders and then issue them. So that's one way of doing it. Or if you were just going to issue for this particular production order only, then you can do a right click and say issue components. And when you do that, it comes up and pulls in the lines that were set to manual issue, and then you can choose to issue the planned quantity, or you could change the quantity. So for example, if I ended up using 210 rather than the planned 200, I can just enter those in, and then I can add this issued transaction. So once I've done that, if I come back to my production order and refresh it, I can now see I planned 200, I've issued 100. The lines have been grayed out because now I've completed, or I've at least issued something on it. And so that's reflecting the quantity I've issued. I can go into the summary tab and I can see that so far I've issued $6,562 worth of materials, as well as $172 worth of resources. Now, if I had made an error in my issue, instead of the 210, I should have only issued 205, or you know, the production area didn't end up using all the quantity that was issued, I can return some of this material. And the way to do that is to go into Receipt from Production, pick the option Return Components, pick the production order, and pick the line you wish to return, enter the quantity being returned, and click Add. Now if I refresh my production order, I'll see the issue quantity has gone down to 205. Now the remaining items on this production order are all set to backflush, except for the final item, which is a core product, something I'm getting back as part of this production. Now these ones here would come, backflush items would get issued when I receipt. The core product and the final product will also be shown when I do the receipting. Now, just like with the issue, I can do the receipt from the menu system, receipt from production, pick the production order, or I can do a right click and do a report completion. And now I see the same quantities have come through, or the planned quantities have come through with the items, and I can either change the quantities or accept those. I can also say I'm rejecting some quantities. So if some of the quantities were completed but weren't, you know, perfect condition, you could say reject and just receive rejected quantities. But the best way to handle that would be to put them into a different warehouse, because SAP doesn't distinguish the stock between rejected or good quantity. So you have to handle it through a different warehouse. I'll add this receipt. And now that I've done that, if I refresh the production order, I can see all the other components have been issued. I go into the summary tab, I can see there's a completed quantity, I can see all the component costs, resource costs, total product costs, byproduct costs, and a variance. So what I can also do is from here, I can also do a right click and say, show me the relationship on this relationship map on this production order. So I had a production order. I've done this particular receipt would have been the return of the components. This is the receipt for my back flush, and you'll notice that, as I said earlier, the automatic issue for production happens when you create the receipt. And since 9.1, the actual back flush issue creates its own transaction automatically in the background. So if I went into this issue for production, I can see there's a notation there that says automatically created by receipt from production 169. And then this would have been the manual issue that I did for those manually products that were specified as manual issues. Note that even though you can return components in the event of overissuing, there's no way of returning finished product once you've received it. The only way to do that is to go through a disassembly process. So next thing we'll look at is how the disassembly production order process works. But before we do that, I just want to quickly show you the journal entries that have gone through the system when I've done the various transactions on this production order. So I'm just going to go into the journal entry screen through Financials Journal Entry, and I'm just going to work myself backwards to the first transaction. So this is the first transaction where we had the two manual issues. So we credited the inventory, we debited work in progress, we credited the labor recovery account, and we debited work in progress. Just a quick look. So this was for the labor and the memory chip. So that's the first transaction. The second one was where we returned some components. So in this case, what happened is because we got some stock back, we debited inventory, and we credited the work in progress. Again, just a quick look. That was the receipt from production. Next journal. So this was the issue for production created by the backflushing, and there's a number of credits to work in progress and a number of credits to inventory or to recovery accounts, and a number of debits to work in progress. Next transaction is the actual receipt from production, where we're debiting the inventory and crediting work in progress. Now, we haven't done the final step in all of this, which is to close the production order. So once you've produced it, done all the issues and receipts, we can go in, close the production order. And when you do that, there's a final journal entry that gets posted to balance all the work in progress accounts. And that's that final journal entry there. You'll notice there's also a raw material transaction, which is basically a final revaluation of the finished product to reflect any variances. Okay, let's have a quick look at disassembly order now. So we'll do a disassembly on the same one, same product that we've been assembling. So all the components have come through. One thing to note is that when you're doing a disassembly order, you cannot have any byproducts or any resource lines. So SAP currently doesn't have that capability. So if I try to add this, it's stopping me from going any further. I need to delete any resource lines that may be in there. and the byproduct as well. And I can only add components. I can release those, and then again I can do a report completion to issue any, sorry, to receipt any components that are marked as, so to issue any, the finished product, I guess, the one that we're disassembling, that's what we're issuing to the product, to the production order. So we issue that, and we do a receipt components, receipt from production order. Yeah. Five, receipt from production order. For some reason, I can't see my production order. But in any case, you'd be able to then also receive the components from the production order. So that's disassembly orders. And final topic is looking at some of the reports that are available. We've got the open items list, which shows you all production orders that are either in a planned or release stage. And you can see completed quantities and so on. So that's one report you can look at. And the other is the bills of materials report, which gives you complete look at, a bill of material, particularly where you might have multiple levels of that bill of material as well. Here's an example where there's a BOM, a child, and a grandchild.